Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the solo mode for Speakeasy. Eagle Gryphon Games, coming from designer Vital Lacerda and artist-illustrator Ian O'Toole. And this is the latest in a line of games that this team has done. All of them very well renowned amongst heavy gamers, and also in the solo community very well known as well, because they all contain kind of robust solo modes. And so for this specific video, I'm going to be talking about the solo mode in Speakeasy, giving you just an idea on how the AI opponent takes their turns. I'm not going into an overview of the game itself. I'll link to that in this video if you want to get a better idea on how that works. But for now, let's head to the table, show you how Joe, the AI opponent, works, and then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think. Speakeasy is a big game with a whole lot of components, but for the solo mode, there's a surprising economy of components. Here you see everything that is needed for the solo mode in Speakeasy. You have a separate rule book where all of the solo rules are kept. You've got a board for the AI opponent, known as Joe in this game, and you've got some cards. Here you've got what are district cards, and then you've got 5 small decks of numbered cards, which are going to be driving the actions that Joe takes throughout the game, and also allowing you to set up the difficulty at the beginning of the game by doing a configuration of cards tailored for the difficulty level that you want. The rulebook shows you that you set up the game as if it were a 2-player game, with a few exceptions for the solo variant, and it also shows you how to prepare the action decks that I was talking about for the level of difficulty you like. There are 4 levels of difficulty, from the brick wall, which is very hard, to duck soup, which is easy. Setting up the cards for your chosen difficulty is not terribly complicated. You just kind of follow what it tells you here. So if we were setting up for a normal game, the gangster mode, what we'd do is we'd have our 5 numbered decks here. They'd all be shuffled. In this case, what we do is we would remove 2 cards at random from the number 2 deck, and it helps. You might think about it as they get progressively more powerful. The 0s are the easiest cards, the 4 are the most powerful. So you'd remove 2 of those from random. And then what you do is replace 2 cards from the 2 and the 3 decks with these 0 cards. All right, so you just would take 2 of those out at random, replace them with these 2 0s, replace 2 of these at random, replace it with 2 0s, and that would be it. So at the very beginning of the game, Joe's board would look something like this. They'd have their buildings all there across the top. They would have their operations markers in place. One of them would randomly be chosen to bump up 1. In this case, we're showing that the production level has gone up by 1. They would have their district cards, and then they would get set up for the first act. In the first act, you simply take the first and second decks, you shuffle those together, and then you're going to be able to have that set up. At the beginning of the second act, you'll have 2 cards left over that you would shuffle in with these. End of the third act, you'd be doing the same thing with there. All of these cards are driving the action. And at this point, what I want to just say is that I'm not going to be giving you an overview of how the main game plays. This is really just talking about how the solo variant kind of changes things up a little bit. If you don't know much about the game and would like a better idea on how it works, I am linking the overview to the main game here in this video. Chris does a really nice job of kind of giving you an overview of how the game plays in general. This again is just really talking about the solo variant. So, for example, at the beginning of the game, Joe's going to pick a place where its still is going to go. And so what you would do is you flip over the district deck, which is simply made up of cards that represent all the districts in the game. And so in this case, it would be placing its stills in District 4. Now, if there were a building, 2 buildings that were already there, then they would draw another one. So anytime that the card is not a valid location, you just simply draw another card. That does happen from time to time. You're also going to notice that on some of these district cards, you're going to see some symbols at the top. Those will apply at certain points. It wouldn't apply at the very beginning when you're placing out the still, but I can talk about those in a moment when they do happen. All right, so you would go ahead and shuffle that back in once you have the still placed. But generally what's going to happen is on Joe's turn, they're going to take the top card from their deck, they're going to flip it over and then do what it says. And as I mentioned during the very beginning, is that the level of the card gives you an idea of how much Joe is going to accomplish on that particular turn. A level 0 card is going to be be doing something very basic, most likely moving up one of these tracks. So let's take a look at that. All right, so what it tells you at the top of the card is which location it's going to be going to and who it's going to be speaking to. So this is, again, these are based off a two-player game. And so it would first try to go speak to this person. If that was filled, then it would try to go speak to that person, okay? So what this is telling you is that you would bump up this marker by 1, and in the solo game, just like in the multiplayer game, whenever Joe moves up on their tracks, they're also going to move their infamy marker up. And now it's going to say that it wants to do a sell action. And so if they had barrels on the board next to operational buildings, they would sell the same way that you would in a multiplayer game. They'd be selling based on the value according to their space on the infamy track, okay? And so once it has done everything from top to bottom, left to right, their turn is done, you would take your turn as normal. Let's look at some of the other cards that get a little bit more advanced so you can kind of see how things work. So this is a level 1 card. First it would bump up on the VIP track, then it would send protection. Now, Joe breaks many rules, as you might expect in a solo game. They always have family members at their disposal. So, and they always have the leverage needed to send them out, okay? The value or the number of them that they can sell out is based upon their VIP track. So you'll be sending out 1, 2, or 3 family members to protect buildings, and there are some very simple kind of rules as to where they're gonna go first. So if they have a building that is non-operational because a cop is there, they would prioritize that building, sending family members there to make a non-operational building an operational building. They're going to prioritize the buildings that are going to get them more money, so they would prioritize a casino over a speakeasy, for example. Here it's telling you to place a speakeasy. Where would you place it? Well, you'd place it based on one of these cards here. Okay, so this is saying District 15. If that was a valid placement, you would place a speakeasy there. If there was a NPC gangster building there, they always have the strength to defeat it. They would remove that gangster building. They do claim city tiles that just get kind of stacked up right here. They're going to give them 1 point per city tile at the end of the game. And this one is saying that you would also draw a helper card. What helper card is it going to choose? It's always going to choose the one with the highest point value. And if there is a tie amongst those, they'll take the leftmost. And they're always going to prioritize the unique types of bottles, of course. So very simple priority rules that just kind of make intuitive sense there. And so that would be how they would handle placing out a building. And then this is telling them that they would produce barrels based upon their level on their board. So Joe is beholden to the operational levels to take their actions just like players are, okay? And we don't have, oh yeah, we do have a 2 in there. I can show you a 2 really quick, and you can kind of see how these go. Move up the green track, place 2 speakeasy, and then do your delivery of barrels. They will go after ships. If they don't have enough in their stills, they will go after ships with a simple priority list there. Let's take a look at a level 3 card so you can kind of get an idea on how all of these work. All right, you can see this is getting a bit more involved. You're doing 5 actions: producing barrels, placing buildings, delivering barrels, selling those barrels. So these can get pretty involved for Joe. Not involved in what you're doing. It's a pretty simple process for what you're doing, but Joe can get a lot done on one turn. So in this case, moving up 2 tracks, putting out a casino, getting protection, and cooking 3 books. They always have access to all of their books. So there are things like that as far as rules that Joe breaks, but they're relatively simple, they're relatively intuitive, and they do obviously have this rule book that can kind of show you how the difference, how things change, but they're not huge changes from the multiplayer game. Basically, Joe just has a little bit more flexibility than you do as a player, but they also have some limitations that you don't as a player, okay? For final scoring, you and Joe would score the same as you would for a 2-player game. Your money, they don't have a safe. Joe just has access to all their money. Protected buildings and helper cards as normal. As I mentioned, they're going to get $1 for each city tile on their board, and to win, you have to have more money than Joe. So, very much like a 2-player game, some rule breaks, but a relatively simple system to run this solo AI. Let's head back up and I will let you know what I think. Okay, and so hopefully that gives you an idea on how the opponent, Joe in this case, takes their turns and how that is going to play out if you play a solo game of Speakeasy. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the solo specific components. I do like that there is a specific separate solo rule book in the game, and I think it does a good job overall. This is a game that has a lot of moving parts, a lot of interaction points, and so by that measure, it can be difficult to get every single edge case that you might have when you're playing the game. And so in the first couple of solo games especially, there were some things that I felt were slightly ambiguous and asked even a couple of questions on Board Game Geek, kind of got the consensus of some other players as well. But what I did find is that as I played more games, what I first felt were maybe slightly ambiguous kind of necessarily weren't. It's just that I didn't understand how the systems of the game worked in general. And so that is something that I do want to point out there. If you are playing Speakeasy for the first time as a solo game like I did, it may take you a couple of games to kind of get a feel on how the general mechanics of the game all tie together. And then some of the questions you might have had, some of the things that you may have felt were a little bit ambiguous, begin to reveal themselves just because there's a lot going on in this game, and you could say that about just about all of Vital Lacerda's games. He has had some games that are specifically designed to be scaled down, but this is a full Vital Lacerda game with all of those things that go along with it, meaning, cascading actions and, you're placing out 11 workers, but within those 11 worker placement spots, you're doing so many different things, okay? And so the rulebook, I think, overall does a good job of handling the exceptions that Joe has and how they handle the different actions in the game. And one of the things that I think is particularly strong for Speakeasy as a solo game and for the card-driven AI in particular is that so many of the things make sense. And so you don't have as many edge cases because they're doing kind of what you're doing, and they're kind of doing it in the same way that you would do them, right? And I think that that's a testament to the game design as a whole in the fact that there are so many thematic connections with the mechanics of the game, and so that carries over into the solo game. The fact that Joe is also kind of beholden to the restrictions on their player board like you are, I think really helps because that makes it a little bit easier for you to interpret. Okay, well, they're producing barrels. I know how many barrels they're going to be able to produce based upon their player board. Now, maybe how they interact with the docks might be a little bit different than you and things along those lines. So there are those exceptions that are laid out in the rule book, but for the most part, Joe is doing things the way that you would be doing them, i.e., hopefully the most efficient way, the way that's going to lead to the most points. And so I feel like this card-driven system is very, very well done. And so when a game like this comes along, a big, heavy Euro game, that is going to have a lot of interaction points. In this case, not only are you interacting in some ways with the other players, but also NPC players on the board. To be able to come up with a solo system that is as elegant as this one is, that is as easy to tailor the difficulty as this one is a truly remarkable achievement. I am just very impressed that they did it in such a way that you are not spending more time on Joe's turn than you are on your own. This is something that is a hallmark for me in a good solo mode, is that I don't want to be spending as much time on the AI's turn as I am on my turns. And in this case, in this solo mode, you're not, right? Even on Joe's cards, like the 3 and the 4 level cards, where you're doing multiple actions on a turn, you're not having to think too much about them because they're a pretty basic rules that Joe follows, and you just go according to those rules. And you've got the district deck when you're trying to decide where they go. And, if you're having to choose between spots, it's either going to be left to right or top to bottom. They're going to prioritize lower districts if there's kind of a tie in certain things. Just very simple rules that are easy to internalize, which is important because in this game, you're trying to internalize so many rules just in the game itself that if you have a lot of exceptions and a lot of things that Joe does fundamentally different from you, it would be a bridge too far. And thankfully, that's not the case here. Joe's turns make sense. They go relatively quickly. And for me, speaking as myself, I spend a lot more time on my turns than I do on Joe's. And that's one of the reasons why I think Speakeasy for me will be primarily a solo game. Because I have mentioned many times, if you have watched any of my, kind of reviews and top 10 lists and things on this channel, in recent years, I have kind of skewed towards more midweight games and have been playing relatively fewer heavyweight games. I'm not abandoning them completely by any means. But in a game like this, where you have a significant amount of time involved in playing the game, I really love being able to deliberate on my turns and not worry about other people at the table having to wait for me to grind through what I'm going to do. And so I think that this is, it's very good as a multiplayer game, very good. But as a solo game, that's probably where I'm going to be playing it the most because, again, I can really just sit there and kind of cycle through what I want to do. Now, having all of that time to take those turns, has that led to me being better at this game? Not particularly, not yet. I'm still perfectly challenged with the easy AI, but I know that as I play, I'm going to be able to more consistently beat that easy AI, and then it's a simple matter of a couple of different card changes during the setup, and you've got a more challenging opponent. Really, really happy with the way that they handled the difficulty levels and the way they handled the solo mode in general. I feel like Speakeasy is an excellent, excellent solo game. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. One of the better heavyweight solo games that I've played in recent memory. And to be honest with you, if you want to know what my multiplayer rating is for Speakeasy, it's also a 9. It's a fantastic game. I love the theme. Of course, the aesthetics and the production are top-notch when you get into these kind of premium Eagle Gryphon, Vestalis to Ian O'Toole games. You know what you're getting when it comes to the component, the deluxe, the top of the line, and it definitely feels that way in this game. The one kind of negative, if I was going to mention it as a solo game, is that there is a fair amount of setup and teardown. However, I feel like that actually gets lower and lower the more you play it. The more you play it, the setup actually is not that terrible, and the teardown is not that terrible. Once you've kind of have it internalized, you're not having to look at the rule book to remind me, okay, what am I doing at the setup? How am I setting up these mob tiles and things along those lines? Once you have that internalized, it's not really a tremendous amount of setup and teardown based upon the length of the solo game, because a solo game is going to take a significant amount of time because, well, at least it is for me. You could probably play it relatively quickly, but I still have to think so much about my turns that it's not a breezy thing. I'm definitely crunching on my turns. All right, well, there you have it. An excellent solo mode for Speakeasy, a 9 out of 10 seal of excellence. Until next time, I'm Mike DiLisio. Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.